Welcome to our channel, Behind My Story. Please like, share, and subscribe.
I confess that I love money and fame. People envy me for it, or they did. I've been a prima donna since the day I was born. All girls dreamt of being me. My father helped my brother and I achieve all our dreams. But there was one fly in the ointment, and this is my story. My name is Amelia. I'm 17 years old. My father's a businessman. My mother came from a rich family, so we were quite wealthy, rolling in dough, one might say. My brother Arthur was handsome, older than me. He went to flight school. We lived a good life without a care in the world. We had everything: cell phones, clothes, cars, servants, opportunities to travel the globe. We wanted for nothing. The most important thing was our happiness. And so my story starts at the villa where I lived with my family. My father employed many servants to attend to our every need. Martha was our head servant. She was in her 40s, funny, smart. Arthur and I loved her. Oddly, we didn't view her as a servant because she took such good care of us. Mother didn't seem to like her for some reason and was always mistreating her. Father, however, adored Martha. Once I left my iPod in the garden, and I was going to get it. On my way to the garden, I passed by Father's office, so I decided to go and talk to him. He was at his desk, and Martha was standing next to him, crying. I figured it was because Mother had mistreated her again. Father saw me standing there, and he asked me why I was still awake, and I told him about my iPod. I didn't think much of it at the time. As time passed, Mother and Martha's disputes became more frequent every day. Father wasn't home a lot, but whenever he came home, he would always ask about Martha first. One time, when this happened, I noticed that Mother glared at Father. I couldn't understand why. Father was often away traveling for long periods of time. One of those times, I noticed that Martha was always tired because Mother was making her work very hard. Mother never let her relax. One day, after midnight, I went to Martha's room to check on her, and I was shocked to see that she looked different than I remembered. I asked if she was pregnant, and she said that she was, but that I shouldn't tell anyone, otherwise she'd get fired. I didn't understand why my parents would fire her for being pregnant. A few days later, we received some really horrible news. Father's plane had crashed, and there were no survivors. We were stunned. All of us were crying, but Martha was crying especially hard. Suddenly, Martha fainted, and we took her to the hospital. Our life had changed overnight. After the funeral, Father's lawyer called us about Father's will. He came to our home and met my mother, Arthur, me, and Martha, and two other servants. The lawyer began reading the will. He started with Mother's inheritance, then mine, then Arthur's, and then Martha's. He looked at Martha, cleared his throat, and said in a quiet voice, "Martha, the deceased has left you 10 million to raise your child." The lawyer read the last line of Father's will, which said, "Martha's child is mine." We all gasped, but Mother suddenly lost it. Enraged, she attacked Martha as the lawyer pulled Mother away from her. Arthur was holding his head in his hands, and I was shocked. I said to Martha, "How dare you? How dare you do this to us? This is our money. You don't deserve any of it." Then I spoke to the lawyer. "Please tell me this isn't true." He replied helplessly, "Unfortunately, it is." Arthur was glaring at Martha, and he said coldly, "Martha, you are going to die." Martha looked very frightened upon hearing this. That night, the other servants helped Martha sneak out of the house. Arthur came to my room that same night and told me that we had to kill Martha. He said he knew where she was, and that her 10 million belonged to us. At first, I was hesitant to get involved. I mean, that was murder, but in the end, I reluctantly agreed to help him. The next day, we made a call and hired a hitman to rid us of that disaster. Later, we received a call from him. He said that Martha was no longer a problem. We smirked in victory. A few days later, the lawyer came by again. Before he could tell us why he came, we beheld a miracle. Our recently said to be deceased father was walking behind him with a servant holding a child. Arthur and I stared at him in disbelief and shock. Then we looked at each other. Arthur's face had gone pale white as all the blood drained from his face. Father was livid and said to us in an accusing manner, "The moment you thought I was dead and that I left an inheritance for Martha, you immediately arranged to have her killed. I suspected you'd try something like this. It was pure luck that I got back when I did. I missed my flight that day, otherwise I would have been dead now. So fortunately, I came back early enough for Martha to call me and tell me about your death threat. When I arrived at Martha's place, she was already dead, but I called 911, and they were able to save the child. Then I immediately called my lawyer to revise my will, to leave half of my inheritance to this child. I felt like I was in an endless nightmare. The police arrived and told us that the hired killer had been arrested and had confessed, and told the police that Arthur and I were the ones who hired him to kill Martha. As the policeman was handcuffing us to take us away, I thought about the irony, how Martha was dead, how her newborn baby had survived and was now the richest child in the country, how Arthur and I were going to jail, and how one small fly in the ointment had caused our ultimate fall from grace.
My name is Laura, and as a child, I craved unconditional love. But instead of cuddles and family outings, my lasting memories are of bitter rows. My mom never wanted children, she says. She told me that the only reason she didn't get an abortion was that she found about the pregnancy too late. My dad left when I was very young, which made my mother resentful. She had to stay and be the responsible mom, which she hated. On one occasion, my grandparents took me away, and I remember thinking, this is what family should be like. The relationship dissolved completely when I was a teenager. My mom's first love was always men, and when I was 15, she moved to Africa for a boyfriend without telling me. It's something I found impossible to forgive, especially as there has never been an explanation or even an apology. She has contacted me since, but always asking for money. That's why I made the decision to cut all ties with her. I put my mother's behavior down to a horrible upbringing, but she can't make the same excuses for her father. Dad had a lovely childhood, but he has no emotions or empathy for anyone. We haven't spoken in 7 years. Although she's so close to his parents and they encouraged her and her dad to repair the damaged relationship, it brought her nothing but more hurt. After he left my mom, he went on to have a new family. That was really hard for me to handle, when he's made so little effort with me. My issues with my mom and dad have badly affected my mental health all throughout my life. I see a therapist regularly now to try to help me deal with the emotions. When I get married next year, neither of my parents will be invited. I grew up thinking I did something wrong for my parents not to want me. My only regret is not telling my dad how much I hated him. I don't hate my mom. I just feel sorry for her and I wish she could see what she's done. Ending all contact with a parent may sound extreme, but for me, it was an act of self-preservation. My dad left when I was 8, and I haven't spoken to my mom once since I moved to Germany 10 years ago. She wasn't maternal and had a really bad temper, which she took out on me. She would never be affectionate, and I felt unloved. I believe my mother may have had a miserable childhood, which meant she lacked the emotional tools to be a good parent. After I grew up and had my own daughter, our relationship got even worse. My mother never came to see me or her granddaughter, but she did form a close bond with her son's new family. It hurt me that she made an effort to spend time with my brother's children and not mine. Over time, I have come to terms with the fact that she never loved me. I don't hate her or feel sorry for her. I just don't want her in my life anymore. Andy hasn't spoken to mom for 25 years, after they stopped communicating in his early 20s. For him, the problem was a lack of respect and common values. I grew up in a children should be seen and not heard household, where my parents' opinion was the only right one. We would have dinner in silence, and my parents never encouraged me in my interests or activities. He says he was never praised for his achievements, only criticized for doing wrong things. Whatever I did, it was never good enough. If I did well at something, my dad would always have to prove he was better. The house rules were strict, and he was sent to bed by 10 p.m. every night, even at the age of 16. But instead of sleeping, Andy found himself listening to the radio to escape the boredom. He quickly became interested in current affairs and politics, which gave him a new insight into the world. It made me realize that my parents' views were snobby, sexist, and racist. I was never allowed to voice any opinion that contradicted their views, or I'd be sent to my room. It made me lose respect for them. Andy and I were living in the same house, but we hadn't had a conversation for over a year. I can't say I regretted not making up with him. He was miserable to be around. Several years later, Andy graduated from university and bought a house. I was so proud, but my mom told me it was horrible. She said it looked like a council house and asked why he wanted to live in a slum. As his career advanced, she became more critical and constantly compared him with his half-brother. I was 21 and felt successful, but she was ashamed of everything I did because it didn't fit her snobbish ideals. Eventually, he stopped contacting both my mother and his brother, and has never looked back. It wasn't really a difficult decision to make because we had nothing in common and they didn't accept me or my life choices. Andy understands why some people see this as a surprising decision, but has no interest in sustaining a relationship for the sake of it. I feel like seeing your parents out of duty is wrong. If you have made no effort to build a relationship with your children, I don't think you can expect them to be there. For other families, the rift is a result of the parents' divorce. Like my friend Helen, she lost contact with 2 of her 4 adult children this year, after ending an emotionally abusive relationship with her father. Since they separated in 2011, it's been a slow process of parental alienation. Her son hasn't spoken to her since last year, and her middle daughter is now ghosting her on every channel of communication. She believes her former partner has used the same manipulation tactics on her children as those that destroyed their marriage. Once the kids got older and she developed her own life and interests, her ex became controlling and tried to stop her from doing the things that she liked. During a period of gaslighting that spanned many years, she says he told lies about her behavior to friends and family. Once he told them she was drunk and suicidal and she had gone missing. In reality, she had gone to the supermarket. When she joined a local band, he told everyone she was crazy and that she wanted to run away and become famous. Over time, her husband's side of the story was believed and Helen began feeling alienated from her family. She sadly lost her mom a few years ago, and her dad is a man's man and took her ex's side. The divorce impacted the children big time and damaged them emotionally. Despite making every effort to build bridges with her children, she admits she doesn't know what their father has told them. He has always made an argument before parties and celebrations to prevent her from coming to the event. He also accused her of having an affair, even though she never cheated on him. The relationships with her 2 estranged children became so strained that she wasn't given a chance to discuss what had happened. The only explanation they've ever given her is that she doesn't care about them or that she treats them as little kids. Though losing contact has been an extremely painful experience for both of us, I don't blame anyone. Not me, not my mom, not Helen, and not her children. It's no one's fault. I can very much relate to how Helen's children felt. They're like goldfish swimming in a tank where someone keeps adding a tiny bit of color every day until they start to see things in a completely different way. I would love a chance to reconnect with my mom, but I can't see how it will happen. At the moment, I feel like I'm standing outside and they're inside a glass room. I really miss my mom, my brother, and definitely my dad.